And Richard Allen, Bishop Richard Allen, called together 32 people from 14 states, and they had a meeting with leadership from the church community of Cincinnati and Philadelphia. And that meeting was the first colored convention in the world. And I want you to understand that they had those meetings periodically until 1906, when the NAACP was born. Who was there? Ordinary people. How many of you young people know the name of the Clark Academy? Avondale. How many of you, raise your hand if you know what the Clark Academy is? Clark Montessori School. Okay? Keep your hand up if you ever heard of Peter Clark. Peter Clark belonged to Allen Temple A&E. And Peter Clark would work with Frederick Douglass. And Peter Clark would create the first high school along with an uncle of his, Gaines High School here in Cincinnati. And the Clark Academy, for those who are older than you, who helped see to it that it was created, was designed to meet the educational needs of those of you who are facing tomorrow. At Union and at Zion, there was a storm brewing. A storm led by Wallace Shelton. If Wallace Shelton had been doing something in the bedroom that he was doing out in the community, he'd still be paying child support. He's got churches all over southern Ohio. Zion Baptist in Rockland, now Woodlawn, Walnut Hills, Hazelwood, Jamestown, Ohio, the Zion Anti-Slavery Church was created by Wallace Shelton. And Union sent out another soldier whose last name was Fawcett. For you guys that want to go into business by yourself, for yourself, Mr. Fawcett had been owned by Thomas Jefferson. And he came here. And he went to Union Baptist Church. Oh, you got to have a rock. You got to have a place of luncheon. You have to learn to talk like a white boy. You have to learn to think like one. You have to learn to beat him at his own game. Check Malcolm X if you don't believe me. It's in the book. It's in the Bible. It's in Malcolm's book. It's in Martin Luther King's book. One of the things that our being enslaved taught us is the people from the field and the big house didn't get together, we would be slaves forever. If the people from the big house and the people in the fields didn't get together, we would be enslaved forever. And it sends a message to America about cross-cultural, interracial, and interclass participation and its value. When Wallace Shelton left Union Baptist in 1842, he built the Zion Baptist Church that you know of on Glenwood in Avondale. But history of yesterday feeds the promise and the reality of tomorrow. L. Venture Booth succeeded him 60, 70 years later. and Booth and Dr. Martin Luther King and Fred Shuttlesworth and all the rebels in the traditional church created something known as the Progressive National Baptist Association, and it now has over 2 million people, and they were the ones that were on the bridge to Selma. They were the ones feeding the fire that you couldn't hold back for the Civil Rights Revolution. And the traditional church kept praying and kept working as well. We learned to speak and work in different voices. We learned to cooperate with each other. In 1963, Dr. King asked President Kennedy to honor the Emancipation Proclamation, and he wouldn't do it. And I voted for John Kennedy. But he would not honor my family, which has been in America since the late 1600s. And as my dad would tell me, if you don't like it, go to school and do something about it. So what did I do? Using what I learned at St. Simon's of Cyrene and Lincoln Heights, at Woodlawn Elementary School on Wayne Avenue, at Wyoming High School, I wrote a letter there to my friend, to Pastor Damon Lynch, Jr., who's co-chair of the Board of Trustees here at the Freedom Center. Now, that's my next door neighbor. We've been buds since we were 12 years old. So why did I just whisper in his ear? No. Church taught us to write it down. The church taught us to formalize it, to make change. The church taught us that the only way we could grow and achieve something, if only for a moment, was to learn the system. You remember God used to tell Moses what Pharaoh was going to do before he got there.
That's right.
Some of you who catch cases on the street, your uncle, your aunt, your mom, your pop, everybody, we keep telling you. This celebration is what we have launched. Should be just the beginning of renewal. And I hope before I'm finished in a few minutes that you can begin to understand the value of remembering and using those memories to feed a better tomorrow. Union. One of the slides had an image of America's first black historian, George Washington Williams. And George Washington Williams preached at Union Baptist Church, let me finish, then became a state legislator in Columbus, Ohio. Then went to the Belgian Congo and busted King Leopold, supporting the tribal wars in the Belgian Congo, where the various tribes were raping each other's women and cutting up each other's arms. And wasn't it in the New York Times again a couple of days ago? It's still going on. But a man from Union Baptist Church told President Cleveland that you should use the moral authority of the United States to put a stop to that. But since we wanted to get resources out of Africa, we didn't care about the people. It's up to us to care about each other. It's up to us to study and set a moral floor and demand that each of us adheres to it. And that's what this celebration is about. Remembering what we can do and using it to do even better. And so George Washington Williams came home, left a message with the president, and he wrote, and you saw it, he wrote a history of the participation of African Americans in the Civil War. There were 4 million of us at the time. 200,000 people of African descent, 200,000 black men walked at point-blank range with Southern guns pointed at them. You don't know anybody in Mount Auburn, over the Rhine, Avondale, who's man enough to walk up against a brother with a gun in his hand. You don't know one. But those were our great-grandfathers. Empowered by the word of God, come from the church in the arbor. Go tell Pharaoh, set my people free. And after the Emancipation Proclamation in January 1863, in July 1863, on the 18th day, at 6 o'clock in the evening, 600 men marched at point blank, and they crossed over the water, and they went up that mountain, and 40% of them did not come home. The place was called Fort Wagner. Lincoln didn't march, we did. When the 1st South Carolina was in battle, there was a black woman, 6 foot tall, Susie Taylor. Can you imagine? They'd go and fight the Confederates during the day, and then in the evening, she's nursing their wounds and telling them, get your Bibles out, we're going to have reading lessons. And she came from the First African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia. So how we got over? We got over holding on to that rock, and we would crawl up to it. And sometimes we would hide behind it and get renewed. But on the 31st of December, 1862, in towns, north and south, we stopped, observed night watch, or watch night, I'm sorry. And then we looked for the promise of emancipation. I'd like for you to imagine being in Boston, Massachusetts. Frederick Douglass was there, and he was at a downtown temple. But in every church, every place of worship, Christians, Muslims, those who weren't quite sure had their heads bowed, hoping that Abraham Lincoln would keep his promise. And Frederick Douglass said, every moment of waiting chilled our hopes, strengthened our fears. A line of messengers was established between the telegraph office and the platform of Tremont Camp Temple, where they were gathered. And he talked about people giving speeches, but they were waiting for the proclamation. They weren't sure that Lincoln was going to do it. He says it was not logic, but a triumph of jubilee which everybody wanted to hear. A triumph of jubilee that everyone wanted to hear. We were waiting and listening for a boat from the sky which would rend the fetters of 4 million of slaves. We were watching, as it were, by the dim light of the stars for the dawn of a new day. A man who had never gone to school one day, a man who taught himself to read, a man who understood that he could influence kings, presidents, heads of major corporations. Frederick Douglass continues, we were longing for the answer to the agonized prayer of centuries. Remembering that those in bonds, as bound with them, we wanted to join in the shout for freedom and the anthem of the redeemed. Sound like a white boy to you? Sound like my grandfather to me. Church taught them to learn the language. He goes on, 8, 9, 10 o'clock came and went, and still no word. God, are we going to be free? A visible shadow seemed falling on the expecting throng. They were concerned. And they were afraid that something was going to go wrong. And then at last, when patience was well nigh exhausted, just about the time they got tired of it, just about the time they got tired of waiting for what Lincoln promised he would do, Judge Hasty, with a hasty step, advanced through the crowd, and with a face fairly illuminated with the news he bore, he exclaimed in tune and in tones that thrilled all hearts, "It's coming! It's coming! It's on the wires!" The effect of the announcement was startling beyond description, and the scene was wild and grand. My old friend, Rube, a country-colored preacher, a man of wonderful vocal power, expressed the heartfelt emotion of the hour when he led all the voices in an anthem, singing the loud timbrel over Egypt's dark sea. O Jehovah hath triumphed, his people are free. The tradition continued. When I arrived at Knoxville College after having an ugly confrontation with a professor at Miami University, our first student gathering, convocation they called it, was Dr. Benjamin E. Mays. And Mays talked to us, those of us from Harlem whose mother were doing day work. Mays talked to us, those of us from Gary, Indiana, whose dads worked in the steel mills with no safety equipment. They talked to us, those of us fortunate enough to get a cashier's check from our parents to go to school. Dr. Mays said, "You owe us. You owe us." And that's my message to the young people from Avondale. That's my message to the two little fellows in the 5th and the 3rd grade. That's my message to my peers. We owe each other. We owe each other the lessons of the past and the knowledge of how we confront our former enslavement. Watching and waiting. In Boston, in Cincinnati, in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, in Baltimore at the AME Church on Druid Hill last night, as they have done for the last 150 years. A voice rang out, "Watchmen from the east, what time is it?" And a voice answered, "It's 3 minutes to midnight. It's 3 minutes to midnight and all is well." "Watchmen from the west, what time is it?" "It's 2 minutes to midnight and all is well." "Watchmen to the south, what time is it?" "It's 1 minute to midnight and all is well." In walking towns like Cincinnati, and in these old towns, they had old men that would light the lamps and they would tell you what time it was. "Watchmen to the north, what time is it?" "It's midnight. It's midnight. It's God's hour. And we're going to be free."
midnight will come. And now it's our time to not just leave. We're going to ask you if you will just hold just for a moment. You'll hold just for a moment. We're going to ask you to please be attentive. He challenged us that we can't just come to programs like this and hear a message, but there's something that we need to leave here to do. And so with our call to action, someone just told me that we could be brothers and sisters. So I said, well, he is my brother from another mother. Something about our spiritual DNA tends to coincide. And so I'd like to bring the presiding elder, Reverend Jermaine Armour from the St. Mark AME Zion Church, to come and do our call to action.
Good evening. Our call to action. Hailing from Louisiana and being known as the Queen of Gospel Music, she had one of the best contralto voices of the 20th century. We know her as Mahalia Clark Jackson, and out of all the songs she gave us, one of the ones that stands out the most in such a time as this is when she sung, "If we ever needed the Lord before, we sure do need him now." Hailing from Fort Smith, Virginia, she was known to be one of the best hip-hop artists in the game. The hood knows her by the name of Missy Elliott. And on one of her songs that stands out in such a time as this is when she wrote the verse called "Flip It and Reverse It." Today, as we remember what Mahalia said, that if we ever need the Lord before, we sure do need him now, I also believe that it's a time for us to consider what Missy Elliott said. By taking what Mahalia said, if we ever need the Lord before, we sure do need him now, and flip it and reverse it, and we'll proclaim that if we ever needed the church before, we sure do need the church now.
That's right.
Yes. Make no doubt about it, people, transformation does not come by your institution. Make no doubt about it, transformation does not come by your constitution. Make no doubt about it, transformation does not come by your revolution, but it is the church that has always been the agent by which God would change the world.
That's right.
You remember when Jesus told Peter, "Upon this rock I will build my church."
Yes, yes.
You remember after the slaves would finish a hard day of picking cotton and tilling the field, washing clothes and taking care of other folks' kids, being whipped on one side of the field and being thrown in a hot box on the other side of the field. And even though they were tired, they didn't give up. Even though they needed rest, they did not go to sleep. Even though they were tired, they did not take a break, but they would go down by the riverside. They would rejoice in Jubilee and have what we call church. Because the church was that thing that revived our people. The church was that thing that preserved our people. The church was the thing that helped our people keep their faith alive. But the question is, where is the church now? Because we're living in a world where one man can kill a teenage black boy in Florida and justify it by saying, "I was just standing my ground." Where is the church right now? We're living in the world where one man can kill a teenage black boy just for playing rap music too loud in his car. We sure do need the church right now. We don't need the church only to stand in a pulpit, but the church needs to stand the ground on its own ground. The church needs to stand on the ground of Detroit, where there's still young people selling drugs and killing our community. The church needs to stand the ground in New Jersey, where they're killing one another over pickup basketball games. The church needs to stand the ground in New York, where they're gunning down firemen and leaving letters saying, "I'm black, this is just what I do." And while we're standing the ground of Newtown, where 20 children were killed, let's not forget to stand the ground in Chicago, where in 1 year 500 young people lost their lives
to gang violence. Where is the church right now? While we're standing in Chicago, let's continue to stand in Ohio. Stand on the ground of Cincinnati, that when a young black man gets out of jail, let the church walk him through a GED program. Let the church walk him through the urban league. Let the church walk him through Cincinnati State. And remember that it was the church who walked with us. It was the church who took us in. It was the church who helped us. And it was the church who let me see that slavery was not the end of me, but it was the beginning of me. And God had a better thing for me. And this week, not forget that if it had not been for the Lord, that's on my side. Where would we be right now? It's time. Where is the church? If it's a call to action, it's time for the church to stop being concerned about building the next building. We got to learn how to build people. It's time for the church to not only say what Jesus said, we got to do what Jesus did. It's time for the church to stop committing spiritual incest when we only talk to us, we only fellowship with us, we only invite people who look like us to church. It's time for the church to call this to action. I'm about to go to my seat right now, but I'm grateful for Mahalia Jackson for singing the song, We Sure Do Need the Lord Right Now. I'm grateful to Missy Elliott for writing the title verse over the perfect beat that said, we got to flip it and reverse it. But I'm also grateful to my grandmother who hailed from Chester, South Carolina, raised me in Buffalo, New York, and used to sing an old hymn while she was cooking Sunday dinner on a Saturday night. She would say, take me back, dear Lord, to the place where I first received you. And I'm here to let the church know that we need to go back. We need to go back when the drug house and the cat house was not the center of our community, but the church was. We need to go back when churches were the healing piece to spiritual needs and physical needs and emotional needs and mental needs. And we need to go back. And every time we see an injustice, the devil ought to get shook out of his mind, because here comes the church. Every time we see racism, here comes the church. Every time we see classism, here comes the church. Every time we see sexism, here comes the church. Every time we see abuse, here comes the church. And every time we see another black man, African man, Mexican man, a Hispanic man being racial profile, we need to say, here comes the church. I want to thank Cincinnati and the PMC and IMA and the Faith Community Alliance and the United Black Front and the American Avondale Concerned Clergy and Ceasefire and all of the people who fight for our faith. But I want to end with President Barack Hussein Obama said that if one voice can change a room, then one room can change a city. And one city can change a state. And one state can change a nation. And one nation can change the world. This is our call to action. My name is Pastor Jermaine B. Armour, and I approve this message.
Is acknowledge those in our community who have responded to calls to action, and they have been serving in our community. And so to present our awards, we're going to bring up Sister Edith Thrower.